Hello, and welcome to Living with Your Dog. I'm Charlotte Peltz, a certified animal behavior consultant. I would like you to be able to contact me with any questions you may have regarding particularly behavior issues, but I can address other things as well. One of my favorites is nutrition. So we're here to help you, and Nate will tell you how to get your questions to us.
To get your questions to us, just email livingwithyourdog@gmail.com. That's livingwithyourdog@gmail.com. And also, you can find Living With Your Dog on Facebook. Living with your dog, living with your dog, living with your dog with Charlotte.
Hello, welcome to Living with Your Dog. I'm Charlotte Peltz, certified dog behavior consultant. Thrilled to have with us today Susan Thixton. And regular listeners will know that I'm a huge fan of hers, and I regularly present you with important information. Susan Thixton is a pet food consumer advocate, one of just a handful of advocates in the United States that fight to hold the pet food industry accountable to existing food safety regulations. She is the founder of Association for Truth in Pet Food, a pet food consumer stakeholder organization, which represents the consumer voice at regulatory meetings, and that's meetings of the AAFCO and the FDA. Susan is the author and co-author of several books, the publisher of the website truthaboutpetfood.com, petsumerreport.com, and Association for Truth in Pet Food. And it's really important because we simply do not get information from any other sources that I'm aware of except Dr. Karen Becker and Susan Thixton, and both of whom, from what I understand, have been banned from attending meetings of the AAFCO and the FDA because you just keep pestering them with questions they need to answer. So tell us a little bit about that, Susan.
Well, we are not banned. We were for a short while, but through I researched law and found that they absolutely cannot do that. AFCO is a private organization. AFCO stands for the Association of American Feed, FEED, Control Officials. And it is a private organization, but its members consist of government employees, FDA and State Department of Agriculture, and they perform duties at AFCO on taxpayer dollar, on taxpayer time, as part of their government job. So, even though it's a private organization, it still is an extension of government in a sense. So they could not ban us. And we kept pushing until finally, at the last minute, literally the day before the meeting, the last public meeting, which I guess was January 2020, they allowed us in the day before. So they like me a lot.
Well, to me, it's the fox guarding the hen house, that we have government officials apparently taking sides. I know, for example, that the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, does not enforce laws that are on the books. They are not enforced. And they actually, FDA spokesperson excuses them, saying that they will use their own discretion. How do we get around that? What do you think of that?
It drives me nuts. It has caused my hair to turn gray. The Food and Drug Administration is the ultimate regulatory authority over pet food. And they have decided to allow pet food manufacturers, and this is the most serious, there's other laws they ignore, but this is the most serious in my opinion, to allow pet food manufacturers to source ingredients from diseased animals and animals that have died other than by slaughter. So I'll give a very graphic description of what this is. A cow dies in a field. Now, if you can imagine these factory farms where they've got 10,000 head of cattle in this big lot, there are many cattle that die, and they might daily, and they might lay there for 2 or 3 days. A truck comes and pulls that decomposing carcass up onto the truck. That decomposing carcass is taken, ground, and then sold to pet owners without disclosure, as with a picture of a steak, a grilled steak on the label. We are not told. That is a direct violation of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Direct. And the FDA says it's okay. We even filed a Freedom of Information Act request because the FDA says, well, we believe it's safe. We believe it's safe. So we're gonna allow it, even though law says they cannot. So we filed a Freedom of Information Act request with FDA asking them, okay, if it's so daggone safe, show us the science. And I filed this document to ask for the science they are basing their belief on. And they have no science. The Freedom of Information Act request, FOIA request, gave me nothing. So it's a serious concern, especially because they're not disclosing it to pet owners.
Well, that brings up a question that I think is, it's very scary, but it's also something that people are simply totally unaware of. And that is, I believe you've stated that chicken that is in a supermarket being sold to people has a definite definition, but we are not able to get definitions of chicken in pet feed. That they're not allowed to give us a definition of what it is. So you see a picture of the steak or the chicken on the package, and we think of chicken that we would buy, and it may not be anywhere near that, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's not that they're not allowed. It is that they have made the decision to not make this information public.
And
that's a big difference there, because it keeps everyone in the dark. It keeps everyone, who would think that chicken in pet food, you see blazoned across the label, made with real chicken, and a picture of a roasted chicken on the label. Who would ever think that it's an entirely different product? The legal definition of chicken in every single ingredient in pet food is nothing similar to the same legal definition in food.
Right.
But AFCO owns those definitions and sells them for $120 a year. And the book is continually updated, so you really have to buy it every year. Even the industry itself. So if you're a small pet food manufacturer and you want to know, what label requirements are, you even have to buy the definitions yourself. So to find out how you're going to be regulated, it's insane. Every U.S. citizen can search till their eyes are crossed. Laws, they're all public in human food. You can read and read and read till your heart's content. But you have to buy the laws from AFCO, and they are copyright protected. You cannot even share them. If one person buys them, you cannot share them. So,
yeah.
And all this does is keep all of their dirty secrets hidden. Even veterinarians cannot access the laws that explain labeling requirements, that explain these legal definitions. So, a pet food sales rep comes in and tells the vet A, B, and C, and why would the vet doubt it? And then, I come along and different people, Karen Becker, Rodney Habib, all these different people who are, trying to bring this information to the public. And people are going, whoa, wait a minute, why can't we have access to this? What are you hiding? And of course they're hiding.
Right. Now, I know that I tell people regularly, veterinarians do not study nutrition in vet school. They may get a presentation from Hill Science Diet or Purina about how to read the labels on the pet food packages. But and I also I say to people, I fully respect that veterinarians have a really heavy load when they go to vet school. Medical doctors study humans. Veterinarians are supposed to come out knowing how to treat rabbits and turkeys and chickens and dogs and horses and pasture land food and on and on and on. And I can understand where they are going to say, okay, the drug companies take care of it and the pet food companies take care of it. I understand it, but I don't excuse it. And it seems like it's only people like Dr. Karen Becker who make that supreme effort to try and prevent health issues rather than just cut it out or drug it to cure it. And
Right.
it's very upsetting because people are told to trust their veterinarians in these cases, and they're the last person to trust. They have been given discounts on food when they've been in vet school for the school studies. They've been given discounts for their own offices. They earn a great deal of money, and it goes on and on and on. It's just, it's so disturbing. Now, recently there have been again and again studies that have revealed that the drug for euthanasia has been found in a number of different pet foods. Many of them are the type of pet feeds that would be on the shelf in the supermarket, but not always. There are exceptions. There are some that are like, wow, really? And that means that from what I have read, sure, it could be a euthanized horse. It could also be euthanized dogs and cats. And what I read was, well, we have to do something with them. They take up so much space in the dumps. We've got to, may as well turn them over as food. What do you ever encounter in the various meetings regarding the euthanasia drug in pet feeds?
Well, they don't discuss it around us.
Susan?
Well, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Department has severe fines for any euthanized animals, like a $100,000 fine to a veterinarian or an animal owner if they don't properly dispose of a chemically euthanized animal. So they can't, in most states, they cannot go to landfills, okay, because wildlife, hawks, eagles, so forth, could access the carcass. So they in most states, it is prohibited for any euthanized animal to go into landfills. So there is this disposal. What do they do with them? Remember, the FDA, it directly allows animals that have died other than by slaughter. Pentobarbital euthanized animals are animals that have died other than by slaughter into pet food. Now, the FDA says pentobarbital at any level is an adulterant and pentobarbital is not allowed, but we have, this conflict here. We allow animals that have died other than by slaughter, but we don't allow the chemical drug. Well, unless you get caught. The FDA does not actively test pet food for pentobarbital. In about a year and a half's time, we had 91 million pounds of pet food recalled because it contained a euthanized animal. We don't know what species, but 91 million pounds.
Wow.
All of that pet food was not discovered by FDA properly monitoring the pet food industry. It was discovered by two people. One was a pet owner in Washington State on New Year's Eve 2016. She thought she was doing the right thing by her little dogs, 5 little dogs, and she got them a canned food that had, all these wonderful claims of how high quality it was. And within a few minutes of the dogs eating, they started staggering around and falling over. She scooped them up, took them to the emergency clinic. It ended up one of the dogs who had consumed the most food did not survive. And this pet owner made the brave but, wonderful decision to have a necropsy, an autopsy, performed on this little dog. The scientist performing the necropsy tested the pet food in the dog's stomach, and it contained pentobarbital. He reported it to FDA. FDA then tested unopened cans, and it took a whole month, but a month later, there was a recall.
A month later.
That was, a month later. So a television station journalist on the opposite side of the country in Washington, D.C. went, I wonder if more pet foods contain pentobarbital. And she tested 62 cans, and she found it in 9.
Wow.
And she handed her testing over to the FDA and more recalls. But the FDA does not go out looking for this. Even so, what we don't see, it isn't there. They do not monitor for it. The FDA does not give pet owners updates on this, but they do give the industry updates on this. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request for Dr. Stephen Solomon. He is the director of the Center for Veterinary Medicine at FDA. Center for Veterinary Medicine is the division of FDA that oversees pet food. And he was giving a speech to the industry where he said pentobarbital in all animal foods, not just pet foods, and I'm quoting here, is more pervasive than we thought.
Yes,
So
there have been a number of recalls. Yeah, that this has happened.
They know it's in the products. They allow animals that have died other than by slaughter, but they don't test for it to keep our animals safe.
Yeah, and another thing I think that has surfaced recently is there had been a lot of many recalls consistently happening about pet feed, and all of a sudden, a lot of attention appeared to be given to raw diets. And what I was reading was it was clearly a reaction to the fact that there's been an increase in home prepared food for dogs and cats that is beginning to financially affect the feed industry. And so now there's this huge attack. And I remember reading one thing that an inspector had been caught with a sample of the raw food that he had gotten from a pet shop in his car on the seat with the heat generating up. And then it was tested and was determined to be, oh my goodness, it's loaded with bacteria. It's terribly. Yes.
It was Colorado Department of Agriculture, and it was July, and he had a cooler in his car. It is required of regulatory authorities. They have procedures, protocols that they are required to follow. A sample of a frozen pet food is required to arrive at the lab, frozen, and the lab is required to document the time and the temperature, so forth. The person who gathers the samples documents the lot numbers, everything, and this is called chain of custody. So Colorado Department of Agriculture had the proper equipment in his car to put these samples in a cooler and keep them frozen, but instead he put it on the seat of his car in July, and we don't even know how long from leaving the pet store to the lab, how much happened. That was Radcat pet food, and they were hit so hard by so many different states who refused. Each pet food manufacturer, when something like this happens, if FDA calls and goes, oh, you've had a positive for salmonella on this sample, all these regulatory authorities are required, if the company asks, to give copies of chain of custody documents, copies of the test, all their documents. They're required to give it to them. All these different regulatory authorities refused to give this information to RadCat. It was only, they had to file a Freedom of Information Act request, and it was months later that they found out that the product was transported on the seat of his car instead of kept frozen. But the company went out of business.
Right. I remember that.
They couldn't handle it. So,
yeah.
and FDA goes so hard after raw pet food, yet human illnesses associated with raw pet food, I think there's only been 2 human illnesses. With dry pet food, there's been 49 illnesses, I believe. And as far as pounds recalled for a pathogenic bacteria, there's been just under 2 million pounds since 2012, I believe. No, since 2007. I take that back. Since 2007, there's been a little under 2 million pounds of raw pet food recalled for a pathogenic bacteria, compared to 149 million pounds of kibble recalled for a pathogenic bacteria.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So it just doesn't make sense why the agencies all, go bad raw, bad, dangerous. CDC does the same thing, when statistically kibble is much more of a dangerous product for pathogenic bacteria than raw.
Right. I've read this time and time again, and NATO back up the fact that, we try to present this information consistently. So I have been for many, many years feeding and promoting species-specific food for the dogs I've had, going back to the 90s. Dr. Ian Billinghurst was the veterinarian that got me started on the raw diet program. But I'd like you to help listeners know how to make wise decisions between the difference between home prepared foods and commercially prepared foods. Now, one thing that is never going to change is that it's so much easier to open up a bag of dry dog food and take out a scoop and put it in a bowl than it is to be shopping wisely and being aware of sales and preparing home food. So I believe you feed, and I know that you do have a list, and please tell people how to get that list of foods that you approve of. So how do we help people? I don't want people feeling really guilty. I recognize busy lives. We have 4 children running around. They're all under the age of 5, and you've got 3 puppies that are trying to raise. And it's like, I don't think I'm going to be cooking food for my dog. I don't think so, folks. So let's help these people, because they're there and they care.
Well, if you want to go the route of home prepared food, I feed my own half commercial raw and half home prepared cooked food. So it's not rocket science. It's not that difficult, and my cooking has never killed anyone, and the pet food industry cannot make the same claim. So, but you have to follow a good recipe. I had a pet owner email me just a couple days ago. Oh my gosh, that the pet owner was only feeding just raw meat to a puppy, a large breed puppy. And, that's so dangerous. You cannot just feed them meat or throw in randomly some vegetables. You have to follow a recipe that gives them all the nutrients that they need and in the proper levels. It's not that hard, and there are many. Karen Becker and Rodney Habib have some wonderful recipes on planetpaws, PAWS.ca, because they're in Canada.ca. And they're very nominally priced, and all different proteins, so forth. And you can even do that some of the time. Even if you don't feed them home prepared meals all the time, you can do it some of the time. Make it, a once a month thing. With a commercial food, pet owners need to realize that most products out there are not food, they are feed. And Charlotte, you did great saying feed. I love when people do that. It says on the label food, but most of them are not food. They don't abide by any food law. The pet products that are food and that abide 100% per food law are products that are labeled on the label itself as human grade. Those products, only on the label, ignore any claims on the website. Regulatory authorities do not scrutinize websites, and many companies will lie. But if you see it on the label, it has been validated. Those products are food. So beyond that, there are companies that use human edible ingredients, food ingredients, instead of feed ingredients, which is a much lesser quality, but they can't tell you. Regulations do not allow on labels, and it's supposed to be on websites too, but again, they don't regulate that, not allowed to disclose the quality of the ingredient. They want to keep an even playing field and keep all of us in the dark. So you're going to have to ask the manufacturer, are all ingredients human edible? And I'll also ask about the supplements. I'm not as concerned, it's close, but not as concerned if a pet product has feed grade supplements in it. There's more food than supplements, but it would be nice if even all of the supplements are of a human grade, human edible supplements. That's ideal. So you just have to keep asking questions. They'll get sneaky with you, and if you go, are ingredients human edible? And they'll write you back and go, oh, yes, all of our ingredients are sourced from USDA facilities. Well, condemned material from a USDA slaughter facility is allowed into pet food, and that came from a USDA facility, condemned material. So you've got to clarify if they try to, you want to ask a very direct question and make sure they answer this very direct question. And if they don't, email them back and ask for clarification and get it in writing and hold on to that as your evidence, because if down the road there's a recall and you find out different, then I highly recommend call a lawyer because they lied to you, and these companies, the legal system is really our regulatory system. And thank goodness we have lawyers out there that are going after companies for these misleading claims and high levels of heavy metals, lead, and all kind of horrible stuff in pet foods. Lawyers are now starting to go after manufacturers.
Yeah, I've been reading recently about the heavy metal in the food. That was a surprise to me. I hadn't thought about that.
And one pet food, and the lawsuit is still ongoing, still pending. They found as much lead, the levels of lead in this pet food, more than was in the water in Flint, Michigan.
Whoa. Oh, yeah. Oh, dear.
Yeah. And imagine, a little bitty dog or a little bitty cat consuming that every day.
It's beyond horrifying because it is all within the eyesight and vision of our government, who's supposed to protect us. And it's like, what do we do now? Who's out there for us? Well, you're out there for us, and Karen Becker is out there for us. But you have a huge impact. But it's so sad that so much of it is like 2 or 3 people that are trying to lead this revolution to provide knowledge. I know, every once in a while when I'm in the supermarket and I see somebody, and I know you may not be able to name a product, but I'm going to name Beneful. And it makes me so upset when I see people buying this, because I have looked at the label and the ingredients. The bag is beautiful, carrots and peas and green beans, and it just looks wonderful. And on the back, I think it was ingredient number 18 began the vegetables, and they were dehydrated. They were not fresh. And it's so amazing that people will not, even people who have become aware of reading labels for themselves, don't think to read the labels, because the advertising industry is so powerful, and the lobbyists have such incredible power to keep all of this going, that it's just shocking. It's beyond shocking.
It is. I completely agree. It angers me because it's our tax dollars.
Yes.
If it wasn't for us, pet owners, there wouldn't be a pet food industry. And yet, I've asked the FDA time and time and time again to host a meeting. I even said, I'll host it. You show up and meet pet owners. I want them to hear our stories and hear our frustration. And they still refuse. Yet we are the largest stakeholder of pet food. They go and meet with industry and take industry's questions, but they don't us. And it's at the regulatory meetings at AFCO, you'd think, I'm asking them for the moon, and they I'm horrible. At a regulatory meeting one time, this was in 2015, the meeting was in Denver. They were discussing expired grocery foods. So at every grocery, there are dumpsters out back, and it's not for garbage. This is to go to a rendering facility, and anything that's expired, plastic packaging at all, goes in that dumpster. The example they gave was yogurt cups, the little 6-pack of yogurt cups. And plastic and all goes in the dumpster. That is ground. Now that doesn't become a pet food ingredient, but it becomes a livestock feed. It's a pelleted food that they eat as well too. A veterinarian stood up, one of our side stood up and went, "You can't do this. I don't want my daughter drinking milk with elements of plastic in the milk." And the entire room booed her.
Wow.
It was horrible because they don't care. It analyzes as protein. So that's all we care about. Let's meet the numbers. We don't care how we meet the numbers. It's got to have, X amount of protein in it. We don't care how we get there. We want it cheap. That's it. Go. And it was horrible. And this is their attitude. And for those of us that challenge this attitude, we've been yelled at. We've been kicked out. I mean, it's horrible when we have a right to be there just as much as anybody else, and a right to voice our opinion, and a right to go, "Excuse me, you're not enforcing law."
Yes, and I have read that those bins outside of the supermarkets, when meat, specifically meat, becomes outdated, the packaging is gone into the big dumpster out there, and this is retrieved by the pet feed industry, people who have the extruders, and again, packaging and all goes into the machine. And when it comes to protein, the percentage of protein, and this is a really interesting element, and I have been talking about this a bit recently on the program, and that is that when a person reads the package label and they see 28, 34, whatever percentage of protein, people have been led to believe that that is sourced by the animal mentioned on the package, but that's not the case. It's whatever source of protein, as you just mentioned, that they can get, that they will go in there, and it influences that total. And this is where that horrible melamine problem surfaced, back in 2007. Nobody to
Yes.
this day knows how many dogs actually died, because it was months before there was a connection between veterinarians finding dogs dying and making a connection to the melamine loaded food. But it was to increase the percentage of protein. And it
Right.
doesn't tell us. And the other thing, of course, that the package labels don't tell us, and I keep telling people, is it doesn't tell us how many carbohydrates are in there and what the sources of them are. Recently, we've had the issue with the taurine, possibility of a taurine deficiency with the non-grain-based feeds. And it's something that the industry is wildly promoting. All of a sudden, it's much better to go grain-free. Why? I mean, unless your dog has some specific issue with grains, there isn't any reason to switch to another carbohydrate-loaded packaged feed, and people buy into it. I mean, they're just sitting there ready to be taken for a ride.
Yeah, it's what we're not told. Again, it's all these things that are hidden from pet owners. I really do believe that if all the regulations were more public, there would be more people, and even the going to the meetings. It costs $500 just to walk in the door to an AFCO meeting. Nevertheless, your airfare to get to wherever they're at different locations every time. Hotel, meals, it's a lot of money. And I think more people would go, more veterinarians would go. But
they're not welcome.
They would listen to us, or not. Well, but, we're not going away. They can like it or lump it. We're not going away. So, we have won a few battles, little, but, we have won, and we're the thorn in the side. So we don't intend to ever give up until, we have a lot more transparency in pet food and a lot more information provided to pet owners.
The fact that so many, most, I think is reasonable to say, veterinarians are simply not nutrition minded. And I had a good friend call me the other day, and her 14-plus-year-old little dog hasn't been eating well. He's pretty perky, he's doing quite well, but the pet feed that the vet veterinarian that they use prescribes some feed for the dog, and he didn't like it. And I know that, and I'm very clear about that all the time. But I said to my friend Kathy, I said, look, he's 14 years old. He's not in desperate need of having a daily balanced meal. What he really needs to do is to eat something. So why don't you just try cooking up a little chicken breast and giving him some chicken breast and some broth, and see if he at least eating something that's very simple. And she had read me the label on the food. And of course, it had undesirable grain carbohydrate things up at the top, and then this long list of unpronounceable words at the bottom. And I said, he doesn't need all of that right now. He just needs to get some food into his system to keep him alive. And then we'll worry about going on from there. And it's so frustrating because people desperately want to trust the veterinarians, and here's advice that's completely wrong. Give the dog something it won't eat. I mean, hello, really?
I give them a little bit of a break because all of the pertinent information is hidden from them too.
Yes.
But the same way I found it, others can find it. Everything that I write on is all, it's all out there. So if I could find it, others can.
I totally agree with you. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm not trying to get down on all veterinarians. I realize they have a lot on their plate, but I consistently attempt to direct people towards veterinarians that make that extra effort to try and prevent illness rather than just treat it.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
that means they've made that extra effort to go into alternative versions, whether it's acupuncture or it's chiropractic or it's nutrition. It all has a tie-in to keeping the dogs from getting beyond good health as compared to then letting it happen and say, oh, now we better do something. I don't think that
And
that's the answer. Yes.
and quality food instead of recycled garbage is a
Right.
great place to start to have good health. You are what you eat. And if
Oh,
you're
yeah. Yes.
eating garbage every day, you're going to feel like garbage pretty quickly.
So tell us a bit about, I know now going back, I realize, and Whole Dog Journal makes this point regularly, we cannot recommend dog food for your dog. And I understand that, and I explain it to people that not only is every dog an individual, but there are breed differences. From what I understand, the metabolism of a Chihuahua requires more calories per ounce of animal than it does a Great Dane. They just metabolize differently. It's how much exercise your dog gets. If you've got a dog that's dock jumping or is hunting or whatever, they're going to burn many more calories. So it's not a matter of me recommending a specific food, but a direction to go in to investigate how to eliminate all of those are not an option and these are an option, and then you have to individualize. So how can you help direct people in that area?
Well, for me, it all boils down to, is it food or is it feed?
Okay, and tell us the
And
difference.
that's the first thing you want, that with the products with human grade on the label, ignore any website claims, ignore any website pictures, ignore label pictures, pretend
Right.
they're not even there, because you don't know if they're honest or not. No one regulates that. But if the words human grade are on the label, then you know that is a food. And when it's words on the label, regulatory authorities do validate that.
Uh-huh.
Other than that, you have to ask the manufacturer, are ingredients human edible?
Okay.
And that's the definition, more or less, of human grade. For
Okay.
a pet food to be labeled as human grade on the label, it has to have all ingredients, including all supplements, are human edible. All ingredients were transported and warehoused per human food regulations, and it was manufactured in a human food facility. Now, the difference of a feed grade, there are feed grade manufacturing, feed grade ingredients, feed grade supplements. And just to give you an example, this is all spelled out on my website, and it was acquired through Freedom of Information Act request, so I can state the company's name. Mars Pet Care. The FDA did a follow-up investigation at a particular Mars Pet Care plant. I believe it was in Ohio, that it was a follow-up to a recall. And a year later, they went back just to monitor things. Well, they noted in their inspection report, the FDA did, that the company failed to prevent the deterioration of ingredients, and that the plant was infested with roaches. In my documents that I received from FDA, it even included a log from the employees of the plant, and the employees noted, quote, millions of roaches. And this was in the food production area. The FDA did nothing. There was no additional recall. The other recall was a year earlier. FDA, saw these deplorable conditions in this manufacturing facility, and it was okay. It was accepted because it was feed. If that would have been, if there would be millions of roaches in a human food facility, it would be shut down in a heartbeat, but not in feed.
Yeah, that's
Everything is different. So, and now feed Human grade ingredient pet foods are more expensive. There's no way around it. Garbage is very inexpensive. And when you don't have to keep millions of roaches out of your pet food plant or refrigerate ingredients, none of that's required in feed. You can run a plant a lot cheaper and thus produce a product that's a lot less expensive. So human grade products are a lot more expensive. And if you can't afford to provide that to your pet all the time, then do it sometime. Some is better than none.
Yeah, I periodically will say, I go a little further than you do. I periodically say, if you can't afford it, get a pet rock.
Well, once you're neck deep, it's hard to get the pet rock. So,
well, and
but
the
just
other,
try the best you can. Give them some food.
yeah, I know
Real
that
food.
the author of the animal the book about the raw diet, he says if you just do something once a week that's healthy and real food, that you're benefiting your animals. There's no question about it. And I do make that point that, for example, I will quote when I read something like, it's so beneficial to be giving blueberries and other berries to your dogs on a regular basis, that at least you can do that. Watch the sales, and those are beneficial for the dog. Certainly, if you think about it, you probably can afford eggs. Maybe not eggs from chickens that are range-free and that organic, but 99 cents a dozen. But it's probably not high quality. What do you think the quality is of the stuff you're feeding? Hello?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But at least this, is really an egg. It actually is a true egg. And
yes,
any of these things that can be offered to the dog. I also stress it's a lot like pay now or pay later.
Absolutely.
You're going to have cheaper here, but health problems later, or maybe you'll save money and your dog will die a lot younger than he had to. That's a thought. We can go in that direction. It's well, and it's true that
but that costs you heartache.
Right. It costs, whenever someone loses a dog and they're suffering, I say it shouldn't be any other way. It shouldn't be that somebody says, it's a dog, go get another one. That's not what dogs mean to us. That's not what they mean to us, and that's not what they should mean to us. And so much of what happens, unfortunately, is ignorance rather than setting out to make it bad. I try to make it a point that I find it very difficult to recognize that a company like Mars or any other huge conglomerate has my dog's interests at heart. They have stockholders' interests at heart. And I think since the 2007 time, there have been a lot of smaller companies that have surfaced. They have trouble staying in business thanks to the FDA and AFCO, but more of them have surfaced and they're worth investigating. And I routinely will say the chances of finding their product in your local supermarket are pretty slim, folks. You may have to make an effort to shop elsewhere.
Well, it's really good to support local independently owned businesses as well too. Independent pet food stores.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those companies are who bring in the small brands and who have done so much homework. A lot of these little independent pet food stores, their owners are brilliant and they've done so much homework on the products that they sell and recommend to their clients. And if they don't know the answer to your questions, they'll find out for you.
Right.
So it's really important. Don't order it online unless you're ordering it directly from a manufacturer. Go support a local business because that is money back into your very own community.
What do you know about the big to-do that has surfaced recently about prescription diets? I remember reading that one could go into one of the pet stores, I don't know which one it was, and they can write you a prescription for one of the prescription diets. And Hills has apparently come under a lot of scrutiny. And I believe there's been a class action suit in California. What do you know about that?
Well, for one, prescription pet foods also violate law. So
Uh-huh.
law says that no product can claim to cure, treat, or mitigate disease unless, and any product that does is declared a drug, and then it has to go through clinical trials and all of this validation to make sure that this product is what it is claiming to be. Even an organic apple farmer that has these pristine, beautiful, no pesticides apples cannot make the claim, an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
Uh-huh.
That would be a health claim. And the FDA could literally come in and shut him down. But the
Right.
FDA makes an exception
Uh-huh.
of this for prescription pet foods. They allow prescription pet foods to make these claims of curing, treating, or mitigating disease without going through any clinical trial. The manufacturer tells FDA, yep, it'll cure kidney disease, or it fends off kidney disease, or prevents stones. They tell the FDA they can submit science. The science is not validated by the FDA. The FDA just goes, okay, thank you for sending. Good luck with your product, and off they go.
Ah,
Yes.
yeah. I remember years ago, I remember reading, it was a Hill Science Diet prescription food, and it was supposed to be treating, I think it was a kidney problem. It turned out, reading the ingredients, starting off with like corn, for example, what they had done was increase the amount of salt so that the dog drank more water. It's like, and we're talking in terms of these packages are running in the neighborhood of $90. I think I could afford.
Absolutely.
I think I could afford to add some salt to my dog's water bowl.
And they're allowed. Those products are allowed to use those same highly inferior quality of ingredients that
Yes.
are illegal.
Yes.
Illegal ingredients are allowed to be in prescription pet foods sold for these ridiculous prices.
And they're so cheap.
With no disclosure.
Yeah, and the fact is that, I've never seen a dog grazing in a cornfield. I doubt that I ever shall see a dog grazing in a cornfield. Maybe out there trying to catch a mouse, but not grazing. And we know that corn, aflatoxin, there are a lot of health issues. Not only is it not healthy for dogs, but it can actually be truly unhealthy for dogs. And again, we have veterinarians that are prescribing, wean your kitty to kibble. This is the stuff we're selling, and it's better for it. And don't mess around with it, and don't add anything. Oh no, human grade ingredients, heaven forbid. We're just going to be in big trouble. So it's very alarming. I cannot tell you what a pleasure it is having you here. I can see Nate getting a little nervous. We're drawing to the close of the hour, and he never goes an hour without having some questions. So Nate, hop in here, please.
Well, we have run out of time for questions, and that is all right because we have got through a ton of information, and I can boil it down into one sentence: that dry dog feed is terrible for your dog. Otherwise, Susan, I would really like you to tell our listeners how they can find you, how they can find out more about you and the wonderful work that you are doing.
Well, the website is truthaboutpetfood.com. And free newsletter, sign up for the newsletter. You'll get all, and there's thousands and thousands of articles on the site to help educate pet owners. Sign up for the newsletter, and you get these stories just like what we've been talking about, delivered right to your email box.
And it is quite an informative website, truthaboutpetfood.com. I was just there before we did the show, and there's sections on recalls, there's section on latest news, all sorts of things. And one thing that Charlotte does like to remind our listeners about that website, Charlotte?
Well, it is so important for us to have this information, and there's nobody else out there, nobody that's doing what you do anywhere near to the extent of how you do it. And I'm just delighted to have a say to my listeners that how important you are in the work that you do. And if we've saved one dog from unpleasant, unhealthy experiences, we've done it. Thank you.
Truthaboutpetfood.com. Susan Thixton, thank you so much for spending this hour with us. We really appreciate it, and we really, really appreciate all the work you're doing for us and our dogs.
Well, thank you all for having me.
Have a great day, and hope we do it again one time. Okay. So a thought for the day. A man is truly ethical when he obeys the compulsion to help all life which he's able to assist, and shrinks from injuring anything that lives. That's Albert Schweitzer. And I think that that connects to where we were today. All right.
Living with your dog, living with your dog, living with your dog with Charlotte.
Isn't that cool?